Hey, it's the Digital Prisoner here once again, and today our topic is going to be Congress. To kick things off, we're going to actually hear a little bit from a few of our congressional leaders. First off, Nancy Pelosi.
Every month that we do not have an economic recovery package, 500 million Americans lose their jobs.
So, if you hear her correctly, every day, every time we don't have a recovery package, 500 million Americans lose their job. Seeing that, if you go to the 2010 Census Bureau census results in America, currently on their population clock, there are some 318 million people. So every month, more Americans than there are losing their jobs. So 2 months, you over triple the amount of Americans there are losing their jobs. All right, next to Harry Reid.
When you pay your taxes. See, in many other countries, it's not voluntary. For example, in many countries, the government makes sure that your employer takes out every penny. Many countries don't file income tax returns.
We have withholding here too, don't we?
Pardon me?
Withholding?
With some programs, yes, but I'm talking about in some countries, European countries as an example. There you don't file an income tax return. There is no need to because your employer takes all the money out. That's the difference between a voluntary and an involuntary.
All right, that's Harry Reid telling us that, hey, paying your taxes is voluntary. Which, if you have to pay taxes, it's not. And finally, let's hear from Dr. Ron Paul.
And you can only do that if you change our ideas about what the role of government ought to be. If you think the government has to take care of us from cradle to grave, and if you think our government should police the world and spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a foreign policy that we cannot manage, you can't get rid of the IRS. But if you want to lower taxes, and if you want the government to quit printing the money to come up with shortfall and cause all the inflation, you have to change policy.
And that's Dr. Ron Paul, senator a representative, and to me, one of the only people who has a clue in our Congress. All right, so let's actually find out more about Congress. Now that we've heard a few of the people that actually lead us in Congress. So, what do you know about it? Most people know, hey, there's a House of Representatives and hey, there's a Senate. And that's about all most people really know. Well, let's delve a little deeper. First, let's get a little terminology out there. The floor, that's the main room or the chamber that each body of Congress meets in. So you always see these pictures of Congress, and there's all these chairs, and then there's this big podium and a little area. Well, this is the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate, and this is where they meet. The committee. Small groups of legislators who perform specific duties delegated by the main body. They do things like consider bills, hold hearings, and oversee executive departments. There are various types of committees, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And this is where most of the work in Congress actually takes place. Sit on. It's to be a part of a committee. Like if I sit on the committee of budget and finance, that means I am a part of that committee. Majority party is the party with the most seats in that particular house. So just for example, if we're in the Senate, there are 100 members of the Senate. Okay, of that 100 members, if there are 51 members that are Democrat, then the Democratic Party is the majority party in the Senate, which currently the Democratic Party is the majority party in the Senate. Um, and then they are the minority party in the House of Representatives. It's the party with the fewer seats in that house. There are 435 House seats in the House, and so if the minority party of the Democrats have less than the Republicans, then they become the more minority party. And currently, the Republicans are the majority party in the House. The committee chair, the most powerful person on a committee. They control the agenda, they control when to act, they control the budget, they control a lot, and the committee chair can make or break a bill. Committees. There are various types of committees. There's a standing committee, and what a standing committee does not mean that they ran out of chairs and this is the poor slobs who have to stand there all day. No, a standing committee is a committee that is always there. Okay, it is a permanent committee, and they are specific to duties that the House or the Senate have, like the Budget Committee and so forth. And we'll look at some of the different committees in a few minutes. A select committee. These are committees that are created to handle something that's not handled by a standing committee. If something comes up, like a national emergency or something, and Congress has to look at it, then they will create a select committee, and that committee will usually meet until this is settled. And then if it's something that will be long term, it might become a new standing committee, or it will dissolve and that committee will go away after it's done what its job was. A joint committee. Committee is made up of members of both houses when both houses must work together. If there's something that they both need to come together and agree on or get something done, they go to these joint committees. It's working between the House and the Senate, because remember, they're two different entities, but we refer to them generally as as Congress. Uh, Conference committee. Now, this is a special committee created when two versions of the same bill are passed. When the House passes one version of the bill and the Senate passes another version, when they make tweaks and alter the bill as they go through the House or the Senate, and then they pass those, well, they have to go to a conference committee in order to come to some agreements between the two versions of the bill, and then they send that back out to each one, and then they pass it through again. Subcommittees. These are committees that divide, or committees divide their work, and these are the divisions of that work into these smaller groups. They have a lot of power over a very specific subject. There could be a committee over energy consumption, or, and then you could have a subcommittee over oil, a subcommittee over electricity, and so they would have a lot of power in that one area, but not, but they wouldn't have power over the whole thing, because they would decide what the decisions of those committees are and what gets reported back to the rest of Congress. Some examples of standing. The Armed Services, this is a Senate and a House. The Budget Committee, that's the Senate and the House, because these are jobs they both deal with. Energy and Natural Resources, this is all the Senate. Foreign Relations, the Senate. Judiciary, the Senate and the House. Homeland Security, the House. Science, which is the House. Small Business is the House. So these are a few examples of standing committees. Some examples of joint, special, and select committees. Economic, there's a joint economic committee, a taxation committee, the Senate Select Committee on Ethics, the Senate Select Committee on Aging, and the House Permanent Committee on Intelligence. And these are all things that come up and, are special, select, or joint committees. Committee memberships. Senators sit on about 4 committees and 6 subcommittees. Representatives, and because remember there are a whole lot more representatives, they sit on 1 committee and 4 subcommittees. So the senators sit on a lot more committees because there's a lot fewer of them. Now, majority party leaders get to determine the size of each committee. Remember, majority party are the ones who have the most in that house. In the House of Representatives, there are usually 40 members on a committee. In the Senate, there are usually 18 members on a committee. The majority party has more seats on a committee and chairs the committee. So if, a Democrat chairs the Senate committee in the Senate right now, well, if the Republicans in the next election take over the majority in the House, which is a possibility, the chair of the committees now become a Republican. So it's depending on who the majority party is, they chair the committees, and then they tend to have more seats on the committees. And some committees have more prestige than others, and they usually have more power. And these are usually saved for the more senior members of the party, people who have been in the Senate or the House much longer and who have been doing this for a while. And they're usually more revered, and they get these better positions. Okay. All right, majority benefit. So the majority party, the one who has the majority, the most people in either the House or the Senate, they get to choose the leaders of the houses. The Speaker of the House, which right now is Boehner, he's a Republican because the Republicans control the House. It had previously been, when the Democrats controlled it, Nancy Pelosi. Uh, and then President Pro Tempore, that's the leader of the Senate, or the head of the Senate, who currently is Harry Reid. They get to choose the floor leaders, chief officers of both parties, and they get to choose the whips, those who help the floor leaders. And they also try to keep people loyal to their party, try to keep them from going over and voting with the opposite party. Senate leadership, you have the vice president who sits over the Senate. You have the president pro temp who runs the Senate pretty much when the vice president's not there. The majority floor leader, the majority whip, the minority floor leader, and the minority whip. And in the House, you have the Speaker of the House, and then you have the majority floor leader and whip, and the minority floor leader and whip. Constituents. These are the people who are represented by the congressman. They have offices in both D.C. and their home districts. Like our senators or congressmen here in Louisiana, they have offices usually in most of the major cities in their district, and so you can go to their office, a scheduled appointment, catch them there, and discuss with them specific things that you feel is important to you, because you are being a constituent of theirs. They're supposed to be fighting for what you want. They're supposed to be representing you. They hold meetings and caucuses in the areas, and if you'll notice sometimes you get phone calls or letters to your house, and it's saying, David Vitter will be holding a town meeting in your area this and date, and time. And then they also send out emails. I'm signed up to most of our senators and congressmen's emails, and they send out like newsletters. They have websites you can go get. They have polls, questions, and so you can stay informed with what your local senators and congressmen are doing. Qualifications. To be in the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years of age, a U.S. citizen for 7 years, and a resident of that state. To be in the Senate, you have to be 30 years old, a U.S. citizen for 9 years, and resident of that state. Terms and sessions. Elections are every 2 years. Now that's every 2 years there's an election. Now every election begins a new term of Congress. And the first Congress met in 1789. Now, with that elections being every 2 years, all congressmen, all people from the House, are elected every 2 years. Senators have 6-year terms. They will be elected every 6 years. So they go through 3 elections before they are, they get elected in on one elections, then they go 2, 4, 6. On the third one is when they have to fight again to try to get reelected. Each term begins January 3rd of an odd year. It has 2 sessions that last about a year each. Term 2 starts the following January 3rd. President can call a special session. This is a rare event, but he can call a special session of Congress if there's something that needs to be dealt with. And joint sessions is another rarity. Powers of Congress. They can declare war. We haven't declared war since 1941. Maintained an army and a navy. Create courts inferior to Supreme Court. Approve presidential appointments and treaties. Pass laws. Pass taxation. They have the power of the purse, which they control the budget. And they can impeach and trial government officials. They also create we talked about they create law. Well, they introduce a bill into one of the houses. It's then referred to one of the committees we talked about, and then the committee might send it to a subcommittee. There are hearings and studies. Then the committee takes what they've learned and decided and report that back to the floor of Congress. It's then debated and voted on, and if it passes, it's sent to the opposite house, and then goes through all those steps again in the opposite, either in the House or the Senate. Uh, if they pass different versions of the bill, then it has to go to a conference action, which they'll agree on it. And then the White House either signs or vetoes it. And if they veto it, it can go back to Congress, and with 2/3 majority vote, they can pass the law. Anybody can write a bill. A lot of them actually come from the president, but it must be sponsored by a member of Congress. A member of Congress must introduce the bill. The House of Representatives put them into a box called the hopper, and the Senate introduces them directly onto the floor. It's given an HR or an S depending on which house it is, and that's why sometimes you hear these odd numbers when Bill HR 565 or S1236, and that tells you which house it was in and the number of that bill. Then it goes to the committee where it's the research and debate. Now, inside of the committees, it can be destroyed, pretty much. The committee chair can table that for a long time, and pretty much the committee chair holds a lot of power because they can pretty much prevent that bill from ever getting passed. So that's why the majority house gets to have the committee chairs. Then it's sent back to the floor, and we talked about all this. And then we talked about the presidential signing. And usually he already knows what he's going to do. If he's already discussed objections and stuff and told them, if you put this in it, I am vetoing it. So they usually try to make it so that the president will go ahead and sign it. Some problems with Congress. Term length. Should the term length be shortened? Should you only have so many terms in Congress? Should you only be able to be elected just like president? You can only be twice. Should you only be in Congress twice? Redistricting. Sometimes people draw up districts. That's why if you ever look at your districts, they have these really funny lines. They draw them up to fit their political goals, which is the gerrymandering. So, is that fair? Pork barrel spending, spending money in a home district that doesn't really have a lot of beneficial upside. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good, but it's spending money in your home district to help you get re-elected. And then quid pro quos. I'll give you this vote if you vote on this bill I'm doing. All right, so until next time, deuces.